I was born in the spring of 1838, when the world still believed war was a matter of banners and brass bands. By the time I was 23, I had learned that war smells not of glory, but of iron, smoke, and blood that will not wash from the hands. They called me brave for tending the wounded. I do not believe I was brave. I was only present. Present when boys no older than my youngest brother wept for their mothers. Present when men who had once marched proudly now trembled beneath rough wool blankets. Present when one soldier, just one, looked at me as though I were the last lantern left in a darkening world. I remember his voice. I remember the weight of his hand in mine. I remember the promise I made. And I remember the moment I knew I would not keep it. This is not the story of all the men I nursed. It is the story of the one I could not save. I was born on the 17th day of April, 1838, in a modest farmhouse among the quiet fields of western Pennsylvania. My father tended wheat and 2 milk cows. My mother kept the house with a discipline so steady even the clocks seemed to follow her instruction. Ours was not a home of loud laughter or reckless affection. Love was shown through labor, folded linens, mended cuffs, cool cloths pressed to fevered brows. I was the second born of 4 children. I learned early to make myself useful rather than visible, carrying water, gathering eggs, stitching hems beneath the oil lamp until my eyes stung. Pride was a virtue, as long as it was silent. Sundays were our only indulgence. We walked the long dirt road to the white-clapboard church at the edge of town. Women wore muted dresses, men removed their hats. Sermons weighed heavily: obedience, humility, endurance. I took those words to heart. As a girl, I felt deeply but spoke little. When my brother Thomas fell from the hayloft and split his brow, it was I who fetched the basin. My hands trembled, but I did not allow my face to show it. Mother watched quietly. "You must not faint at the sight of suffering," she said. I nodded, swallowing fear as I had always done. By winter, the fields lay bare and hard as iron. Snow would gather against the fence posts, and the wind would moan through the eaves. Those were the months I stitched most. Quilts for neighbors, shirts for my father, tiny garments for new mothers. I worked quietly, imagining futures for others while seldom imagining one for myself. The first whisper of war reached us in winter, 1860, carried not by cannon but by newspapers folded beneath arms and voices lowered in the general store. By April 1861, when news came of shots fired at Fort Sumter, the whispers had become a storm. Church bells rang not for worship but for gathering. Men I had known since childhood began drilling in the fields. Pride swelled like a fever. Thomas, my younger brother, was 17 when he announced his intention to enlist. Mother's spoon slipped from her hand. "You are still a child," she said. "I am a man," he answered quietly. Father did not forbid him. "If you go, go with steadiness." So Thomas left in June. I stitched his name into the collar myself. Letters arrived at first, filled with marching songs and camaraderie. Then they carried different tones: mud, hunger, illness spreading like smoke. Wagons began returning not with soldiers, but with lists of names. It was during that season that I made my decision. The church called for women willing to assist as nurses near the front. Supplies were needed, hands were needed. The wounded lay unattended for days. I felt something stir within me, stronger than fear, sharper than pride. Mother opposed it at once. "Hospitals are no place for unmarried girls." I replied, "I have seen blood." Father studied me. "You would go for Thomas?" he asked. "I would go for all of them." Within a fortnight, I found myself aboard a crowded carriage, bound southward, clutching bandages, thread, and my Bible. The first field hospital struck me before I could see it. Not a building, but a cluster of canvas tents on trampled earth. The ground soaked with rain and blood. The scent, iron, rot, sweat, smoke, struck me before the sights did. Men lay on cots so close their hands nearly touched. Some groaned, some stared blankly, some did not move at all. A surgeon brushed past. "If you are to stay, you will not faint." I answered, "I will not." And I did not. I washed wounds, held basins, wrote letters for those too weak to write themselves. I learned the sound of men trying not to cry. At night, I lay on a narrow cot listening to distant gunfire and closer breathing. Steadiness and strength, I told myself. But beneath that, something softer was awakening. I first noticed him on a gray morning, mist blurring the edges of men. Samuel Whitaker, private from Ohio, lay upon the third cot from the entrance. His uniform torn, his face pale, yet his eyes were open. "Steady. Miss," he asked, "am I yet among the living?" "You are," I said. And he smiled faintly. Over the following days, I found my steps leading often to the third cot. He bore pain with restraint. He spoke of his mother's orchard, apple blossoms like snow, a younger sister's tight braids. Small indulgences, extra blankets, warm broth, grew between us. Our hands lingered longer than proper. His eyes followed me across the tent. I began to imagine a life beyond the battlefield. Foolish hope. Recovery was not linear. A fever struck silently. Infection crept through his wound. I held lanterns, dipped cloths, whispered reassurances. One night he asked, "Tell me something true of you." I hesitated. Pride warned me. I said only, "I fear failing those who depend upon me." He replied, "You cannot save us all. But you try." And that unfinished thought lodged in me like a splinter. The fourth night, his breath became shallow. "Stay," he whispered. "I am here," I answered. "You are kinder than you believe." His grip weakened like a tide receding. I did not speak the words my heart had waited to offer. There was no more time. One shallow inhale. One softer exhale. Stillness. I should have spoken. I should have chosen tenderness over propriety. Instead, I chose silence. They carried him out before dawn. The living continued swiftly. Another man took his cot. I washed instruments, bound fresh wounds, answered questions with steady voice. Only once did I falter, reaching for the third cot. That evening, I wrote to his mother. I told her he remembered the orchard, bore himself with dignity, and was not alone at the end. I left out the words he had inspired in me. I wrote a second letter to him, never sent, folded within my Bible. "I cared for you beyond duty." Months later, a broadside listed the dead. Samuel Whitaker. Seeing his name rendered plainly was like losing him a second time. I never learned if my first letter reached Ohio. Perhaps it was lost. Perhaps she wept. Perhaps she believed every word. As for the words I withheld, they remained mine alone, echoing in memory no surgeon could open and cleanse.